Добрий день всім.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ukraine Media Center to Ukrinform continues its work, and right now in our studio we have Yuriy Vaskov, Deputy Minister of Infrastructure of Ukraine, and Ihor Barsky, Director of state-run company Mariupol Commercial Seaport. And we'll discuss an extremely important subject, namely how our seaports operate at the moment. Could you please tell us about the situation? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I'd like to remind you that in Ukraine's mainland there are 13 seaports and 5 more ports are there in temporarily occupied Crimea. Currently, seaports in Mariupol, Berdyansk, Skadovsk and Kherson are in the temporarily occupied territory, so they are closed. Recently there was a decision issued by the Ministry of Infrastructure. They are closed because we don't control the situation there in those ports, so the decision was made to close their operations. About Pivdenny, Mykolaiv, Olvia, Odessa, Chernomorsk and Belgorod-Dnestrovsk ports, the situation there is as follows. Starting from February 24th, the moment of military aggression against Ukraine, the entry and exit of ships from those ports is not possible either. So those ports only handle cargoes and ships which were already in the course of processing by the 24th of February. So it's about 20% of the volume of operations they had in peaceful time, and they handle railway and truck cargoes within the country. Uzdenetsk and Uzdenetsk, Ismail and Reni seaport, 3 ports in Danube River work in the usual mode. Now about the numbers and capacity. I'd like to emphasize that during the peaceful time, more than 75% of foreign cargoes have been coming through ports. There are ports which have closed their operations and they have blocked because of military aggression, and those ports accounted for more than 90% of the total turnover. Now there are ports which have not been restricted. Those are ports on Danube River, but those can support 10% at most of the total turnover, goods turnover, commodity turnover in seaports. Of course, we have taken action. We have made certain steps to increase the capacity of ports on Danube River. And if you compare April against February of this year, the amount of cargoes processed increased by more than 4 times. There have been about 850,000 tons of cargoes handled for export and import, including 450,000 of agrarian goods. But compared with the peaceful time, it's up to 15% of the total traffic, total turnover. We believe that, up to 1 million tons per month, the monthly capacity of Danube ports will increase up to 1 million tons, but with western border, where we have exports and imports coming by railway, we will be able to support about 35% of export and import that we will be able to transport, compared with the need and compared with the amount of goods which have to be exported, which wait to be exported. So this is a very important area of economic activities for Ukraine, because we understand that the higher are the amounts of export, the more foreign currency comes to Ukraine. And if this situation we have today, when key seaports are blocked, will continue, then definitely it will have a very adverse effect on the Ukrainian economy, which is important and especially important in the wartime, and this is one of the priorities. Dnipro River. Unfortunately, Dnipro River too cannot be used for logistical purposes because the last gateways in Kakhovka have also been occupied. We don't control it, so the traffic from Dnipro River to Black Sea is not possible. That's the brief information. If you have any questions. Yuriy, if we talk about the damaged infrastructure, how do you assess it at the moment? Of course, the most damage has been in Mariupol Seaport, also in Berdyansk Seaport. Infrastructure has been damaged in Olvia Port, which was recently given to a Qatar-based company on the concession basis. There has been also some damage in Chernomorsk, in Mykolaiv, but the damage which is there in the port that we cannot control, of course we cannot quote the numbers there because we have to get access to that infrastructure first. But today we already understand that we are talking about tens of billions of hryvnias, but we will only be able to quote the exact numbers, the precise numbers when we get access to that information. Thank you. Yuriy, maybe I'd like to ask you to tell us what's happening, what the situation in Mariupol Seaport company. You're welcome. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mariupol Seaport, as well as the city of Mariupol, has felt this war from the very first hours because there has been that military combat action, that warfare around Mariupol from the very first day, and ships at the seaport have been blocked. Unfortunately, there have been 6 foreign ships in Mariupol Seaport which are still blocked there, and some of them will not be able to leave Mariupol Seaport anymore without some repair by the ship repair facility in Mariupol, and that one has been practically destroyed, like Mariupol port itself. Also, there has been some blocking, and there are mines in Mariupol Seaport to prevent landing ships from entering. But Mariupol seamen have taken active part in defending the city of Mariupol and Mariupol Seaport. Mariupol Seaport was the second last outpost in Mariupol. The last fortress has been Azovstal steel factory, as you all know. Those working in Mariupol Seaport were defending Mariupol by creating those barricades and other fortification, by helping local civilians. And the city staff issued instructions to me to support the Primorsky district in the city of Mariupol. Mariupol has 4 districts in the city, and Primorsky is one of them. So it was first of all about water supply, fuel supply, and supporting hospitals in that district. Literally 5 days after the war started, Mariupol lost electricity supply. At the same time, water supply stopped because, there are pumps and no one diesel generator would be able to provide sufficient power. So we did not have water, electricity, nor telecommunications. Everything had to be done in parts, step by step. and Mariupol Seaport brought about 300 tons of water to the city with our water tanks. We were bringing wood to the city because people were making fire around their buildings just to prepare food and to warm up, and it needed some firewood. We provided supplies to hospitals, in particular to our hospital in Primorsky district. We managed to launch our Seaport canteen to bake some bread, to cook food, to cater for those working in the seaport and for those wounded servicemen from the military. And we continued doing all that until we ran out of resources. We exhausted our resources. We all understood that it cannot continue forever. And for more than 3 weeks, we maintained our canteen and we provided food to people. The situation changed every day. When there was very heavy shelling, we had fewer numbers of people, but when it became quieter, we had more people, and the maximum number we had was 500 and even more people whom we gave food. We gave bread to people, 1 loaf per person from in very first days, then half a loaf, then quarter loaf, and in some other nobody else would bake bread in the city of Mariupol, nobody but us. But the main resource was yeast and flour, and we did not have yeast anymore, and at some point we had to close our canteen. What else to tell you? When we started running out of resources, we had our plan B for supplying the city, the Seaport and Primorsky district with everything necessary. So that was plan A, but when we were running out of resources, we switched to our plan B, and our plan B was about evacuation. And by that time, the city was already surrounded by the enemy, it was under siege, and the combat action was right behind the fence of our company, of our port, and it was difficult to evacuate. First of all, it was about fuel, but we managed to organize it that, you know, when we created a convoy of cars, we managed to fuel them. The second difficult issue was about wheels. Because of bombing, because of shelling, because of all the damage, it was very problematic to move around the city. Every time we would lose a wheel or even 2 wheels, and again we managed to resolve that issue. We managed to organize it and to live with 8 cars. Putting people in all passenger seats, women and children, and in my car there was a woman with a 3-month-old baby, because they didn't have any way to leave. If we would not manage to implement our plan B, we also had our plan C, but I will describe it later. We managed to leave. And now we are gathering all possible information about our company, about our port employees. There have been 1,660 people who responded out of 3,000 employees that we had. 1,660 out of 3,000. Also, we have information about 23 employees of our port who died. I believe that among those who have not responded, which is almost 50% of our employees, I think that we will also have some sad information about some more of them. But we pay salaries to people, we prepare for our return, we develop our plans to restore our port, our company, and we receive support from the Ministry of Infrastructure in various ways. And Mariupol will be Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. Thank you, Ihor. Could you please tell us, is our understanding correct that currently Mariupol commercial seaport has been practically damaged, destroyed, ruined? As Yuriy Vaskov said, it's difficult to assess the destruction, the damage, but based on the videos that we have, almost all those buildings have been destroyed fully or partially. And, you know, the most valuable parts of the port are bird and cranes. Some of those facilities have been damaged, and there are some sunk ships around some of them. Also, a dock of the ship repair yard has sunk, and that's a problem not only for Mariupol Seaport, but for the whole Sea of Azov. But we believe that as soon as the port is liberated, we will be able to restore some operations very quickly, but of course we need time for everything. Thank you, Ihor. Maybe a question for you: what happens to those ships blocked? We understand that we have those not only in Mariupol but also in other cities, and what happens to them and their crews? Currently, almost 70 ships have been blocked in those seaports from which it's impossible to have any marine traffic. The worst situation about crews has been in Mariupol, because in other ports, crews of those ships were able to evacuate, to leave using ground routes. And many ship owners made such a decision, and most of the crew, most of the seamen from those blocked ships left for other countries. But in Mariupol Seaport, again, we don't have complete information about the situation. Those ships that remained there and those crew members who remained there in those ports, of course, we wait for the end of that siege, when it will be possible to have marine traffic for ships to leave. Here we completely depend on our military. When the military tells us that it can be done, that it is safe, then almost every ship will be ready to leave within up to 1 day. But currently, today, unfortunately, it is impossible. Yuriy, we all hope for that, indeed. We all hope that we will get those ports back as soon as possible. Speaking about future investments, I'm sure that you have already been considering those processes. Have there been any arrangements with the European Union or with other countries about future investments? Well, first of all, in our seaports, 80% of cargoes, 80% of goods are processed with our existing investors. And of course, according to our information, all of them are ready to invest their money into the recovery of that damaged infrastructure and development of new infrastructure, because after the end of this war, of course, export and import will be a priority issue. Also, we maintain dialogue with foreign financial institutions, with some funds and other countries about their willingness to contribute to fund the development of new infrastructure if necessary. So there are such plans, and we believe and we hope that very soon those activities will start. Thank you for information. Dear colleagues, you can ask your questions. Please speak into the microphone. Thank you. I have a question for you. I am from Reuters. And my question is about a different part of infrastructure, namely about railways. In recent weeks, Russians actively attacked the railways. Do you know what sort of goals they have? Well, their goal, you better ask them what is their goal. But I believe that, it's like destroying other types of critical infrastructure. It's about destroying, damaging the critical infrastructure as much as possible for military reasons, for economic reasons, for social reasons, nothing else. Thank you. Any more questions? You're welcome. Thank you for your information. This is Phoenix TV. Mr. Vaskov, how do you assess the volume of damaged infrastructure in Ukraine, the amount, the volume? And second question is this: now seaports have almost no operations, and from Europe, through western border, there is truck transportation, road transportation, railway transportation. How to increase the capacity of railways and road transportation, especially railways? Thank you. As I already said, western borders and Danube ports and Danube River make up the only way for export and import of goods. For Danube ports, I already mentioned that steps have been taken. We have increased capacity, the volumes by almost by the factor of 4, and more or less the same things are done by Ukrainian railways and other authorities and companies. While the western border, using railways alone, in April there has been about 3.5 million tons of goods transported using railways. The railway infrastructure has been developing, reloading terminals have been developing for gauge change, terminals for pumping of liquid goods are developed, checkpoints are developed. We try to deregulate border controls as much as possible for goods to pass the border as quickly as possible with minimum inspection, with minimum formalities. As a result of all those steps, the capacity on the western border should increase by 50% in the next several months. But even with that in place, in any case, jointly with Danube ports, it will be insufficient even to process 50% of the volumes which in the peaceful times were processed through seaports. Now about the infrastructure, I cannot assess it in some percentage for the whole Ukraine, but I can say this. According to estimates by our ministry, the Cabinet of Ministers, Office of the President, to recover, to restore that information, that infrastructure, if there is funding, 2 to 2 years and a half will be enough. 2 years to 2 years and a half. That's the task raised by our government. Thank you. Any more questions? You're welcome. I am from Ukrinform, and we have 3 questions, but they are somehow connected to what our colleagues asked. Could you please clarify? Before the war, you assessed the minimum annual needs for seaport infrastructure at 7 billion Ukrainian hryvnias. Have you calculated it now after all this? Of course, it will be much more, because speaking about Mariupol, port of Mariupol, you can just get some information from the media, and we see that there are sunk ships, there are cranes destroyed, we have capital buildings broken, we have wharves, berths damaged. And just for you to understand, to restore one berth is up to 1 billion hryvnias, and there are more than 20 of those in Mariupol port. More than 20. So how many of them will need capital repair or current repair? We don't understand it as yet, but based on information we already have, at least 20 billion hryvnias are needed even now, based on the information that we have. That's for sure. Another question is this. How does cooperation develop with our neighbors to increase those exports, in particular about railways? There was a project previously proposed to have a grain hub on the border with Poland and reconstruction, renovation of railway infrastructure with Romania. With all those neighboring countries, we maintain very close cooperation. We receive support from them both about infrastructure development and about deregulation of border control procedures. For example, almost all neighboring countries have already dropped the requirement for permissions for trucks. They increase the capacity of checkpoints. They also make other steps. Talking about so-called hub, yes, indeed, this project is at the initial stage of its implementation, if you mean that intergovernmental project. But private companies, both from the Ukrainian side and from European side, from foreign countries, have already been investing, have already been developing the existing reloading facility. So due to those activities, there is this increase. And we believe that this way is very promising for the nearest years. My last question is this. Our experts mentioned partial reloading in Ukrainian ports, whereby vessels, ships will be accompanied by military convoys. Do you consider such options? Yes, we have been working on such option because our military may consider renewal of resumption of marine traffic when they have security guarantees for such operations, because during the wartime 8 civilian ships in so-called Greater Odessa and Mykolaiv areas have been attacked. 8 civilian ships, and there have been victims, and some property has been lost, and so on. So to avoid the same things when marine traffic is resumed, we need security guarantees from third countries or from other international intermediaries. So we have developed our opinion, our views jointly with our military, and we are awaiting a confirmation. By now, we have not received such confirmation, but this sort of mediation with military presence, of course, can be considered and should be considered. It is a possible solution. Thank you. Thank you. We have a question online. Could you please tell us how the siege of our ports will affect the food situation on the global scale? This is a very relevant question. Ukraine was, and I hope will, remain one of the leading countries on the global scale to support the food security for many countries in Africa and other continents. Unfortunately, now agrarian exports have been affected by all those difficulties because of ports being blocked. According to calculations by experts, more than 20 million tons of previous year's harvest have not been exported as yet, and in 2 months this new harvest campaign will start. So there is a problem for us that we cannot export, but for countries who have food security problems, that's a life and death issue, and we already understand that it has critical consequences. As far as I know, this issue was discussed at President Zelensky's meeting with Secretary General of the UN. And we believe that the United Nations may become that intermediary to receive those security guarantees and to restore the marine traffic, first of all, for agrarian products and for food safety. United Nations are dealing with that issue. And there is this unit, there is this program. I think it can be resolved, but I will repeat that by now we have not received any security guarantees to renew navigation, to renew maritime traffic. Any more questions? Please speak into the microphone. I'm Viktor Gasenko, CGTN. Please tell us which types of goods, of cargoes were mostly transported through Mariupol port, and how the western border processes them at the moment, because we understand that there is no other way but the western border because of that situation in the east and because of the port being blocked. Starting from 2014, unfortunately, the amounts of goods handled in Mariupol have sharply dropped. In 2012-2013 it was about 15 million tons, but after those events in east of Ukraine started after war in 2014, it dropped to 6 to 7 million tons, and about 95% of goods processed by Mariupol Seaport until February 2024 was about two factories, Illicha metal works and Azovstal steel factory. Unfortunately, now they have not been exporting for the same reason that Mariupol port is not operating. So, unfortunately, we are not talking about readjusting goods from Mariupol to western border. Any more questions? Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Vaskov, thank you, Ihor, for joining us. Thank you for your information. And I would like to remind you that at 2:30 we'll have Ivana Klimpush-Sinsadze, Parliament member, Deputy of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. Please stay with us.